The encounter. The fluorescent lights of orbital station Harmony flickered to life, signaling the start of another artificial day. In the cramped maintenance shaft of Section 7B, Jack Foster stretched his aching muscles, grimacing as his back popped in protest. At 32, he was hardly old, but the constant repairs and upgrades required to keep Harmony operational were taking their toll. Jack wiped the sweat from his brow, leaving a streak of grease across his forehead. He glanced at his wrist display, 600 station time. His shift had officially ended an hour ago. The malfunctioning air recycler wasn't going to fix itself. With a sigh, he reached for his multi-tool and dove back into the tangle of wires and circuitry. As he worked, Jack's mind wandered to the reason he'd taken this job in the first place. Harmony was humanity's crowning achievement, a neutral ground where species from across the galaxy could meet, trade, and negotiate. It was meant to be a symbol of cooperation and progress. But from where Jack sat, elbow-deep in outdated Earth tech cobbled together with alien components, it felt more like a patchwork dream barely holding itself together. A sudden hiss of released pressure signaled success. The air recycler hummed back to life, its gentle whine a stark contrast to the rattling death throes it had been emitting for the past week. Jack allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was necessary. Without people like him keeping the station's vital systems operational, all the high-level diplomacy and cultural exchange happening on the upper levels wouldn't be possible. With the recycler fixed, Jack began the arduous process of squeezing out of the maintenance shaft. As he emerged into the corridor, he nearly collided with a tall, willowy figure. "Oh, I'm terribly sorry. I didn't see you there," a melodious voice chirped. Jack looked up, and up, into the iridescent eyes of Celeste. The alien's skin shimmered with a pearlescent sheen, its elongated limbs giving it an almost ethereal appearance. Jack had seen Celeste before, of course. Their race was known for their diplomatic skills and were frequent visitors to Harmony, but he'd never been this close to one. "No worries," Jack managed, suddenly acutely aware of the grease and grime coating his coveralls. Can I help you with something? This area's usually off-limits to non-maintenance personnel." The Celeste's bioluminescent patterns flickered in what Jack assumed was embarrassment. "Yes, I seem to have gotten turned around. I was looking for the central garden, but I must have taken a wrong turn at the last junction." Jack couldn't help but chuckle. The central garden was on the complete opposite side of the station, in the public areas. This Celeste had wandered far off course indeed. "You're a bit off track," he said, trying to keep the amusement out of his voice. "The garden's about as far from here as you can get without going for a spacewalk." The Celeste's skin rippled with color. Was that their version of a blush? Oh dear, how embarrassing. "I don't suppose you could point me in the right direction?" Jack glanced at his wrist display again. He was already late getting off shift, and he'd been looking forward to grabbing some food and hitting his bunk. But there was something in the Celeste's voice, a note of distress that seemed out of place for such a simple navigational error. "Tell you what," Jack heard himself saying, "why don't I walk you there? This station can be a maze if you're not used to it." The Celeste's eyes widened, that inner light brightening. "Oh, I couldn't possibly impose." "It's no imposition," Jack assured them, surprising himself with his sincerity. "I'm Jack, by the way, Jack Foster." "A pleasure to meet you, Jack Foster. I am Zimla, third attaché to the Celeste Diplomatic Corps." The alien inclined their head in what Jack assumed was a gesture of respect. As they began walking, Jack couldn't help but notice the tension in Zimla's movements. The Celeste's usual fluid grace seemed strained, their luminescent patterns pulsing erratically. "So, what brings a third attaché down to the maintenance levels?" Jack asked, trying to make conversation as they navigated the utilitarian corridors. Zimla's skin dimmed slightly. I needed some time away from the negotiations. Things have been rather intense lately." Jack nodded, though he didn't fully understand. His job kept him far removed from the political maneuverings that were Harmony's primary function. Tough crowd up there, huh? Zinla made a sound that might have been a laugh, a tinkling, shine-light noise. You could say that. The Arcturian delegation is being particularly obstinate regarding trade routes through the Orion Arm. And the humans. They broke off, glancing at Jack. Forgive me, I shouldn't speak ill of your species. Hey, no offense taken, Jack said, holding up his hands. I'm just a mechanic. Whatever's going on up there is way above my pay grade. They lapsed into silence as they entered a lift that would take them to the station's central axis. As the doors closed, Jack couldn't help but study Zinla's reflection in the polished metal. The Celesti seemed to be vibrating slightly, their skin cycling through a range of muted colors. Are you all right? Jack asked, concern overriding his usual reticence around the station's more important inhabitants. Zinla's head snapped up, their eyes meeting Jack's in the reflection. Yes, of course. Why do you ask? Jack shrugged. You just seem a bit, I don't know, wound up. I mean, I'm no expert on Celesti body language, but you look like I do after pulling a triple shift during a station-wide systems upgrade. For a moment, Zinla said nothing. Then, to Jack's surprise, the alien's rigid posture seemed to crumple. They leaned against the wall of the lift, their skin fading to a dull, matte gray. Is it that obvious? Zinla asked, their voice barely above a whisper. Jack felt a pang of sympathy. He might not understand the pressures of galactic diplomacy, but stress was universal. Only to someone who's looking, he said gently. You want to talk about it? The lift doors opened, depositing them in the bright, airy central hub of Harmony. Jack led them to a quiet alcove, away from the main flow of traffic. Zinla seemed to gather themselves, their color slowly returning to its normal pearlescent sheen. It's complicated. The negotiations I'm involved in, they're not going well. There's so much at stake, and I fear I'm not up to the task. The Arcturians are pushing for concessions that would devastate several developing worlds, and the human representatives. They trailed off, looking at Jack apologetically. Hey, like I said, no offense taken, Jack assured them. What about the human reps? Zinla sighed, a sound like wind through crystal chimes. They're being characteristically stubborn, insisting on maintaining their current level of influence despite being relative newcomers to the galactic stage. It's causing friction with some of the older races. Jack nodded slowly. He might not know the details, but he understood the gist. Humanity, brash and ambitious, butting heads with ancient civilizations set in their ways. It was a story as old as first contact. Sounds like a real mess, he said. But if you don't mind me saying, it also sounds like exactly the kind of situation Harmony was built for. A place where everyone can come together and work things out, right? Zinla's skin brightened slightly. Yes, I suppose you're right. It's just the pressure, the expectations. Sometimes it feels overwhelming. Jack chuckled. Tell me about it. You know how many systems on this station are held together by spit and prayers? One wrong move, and the whole place could come crashing down around our ears. Zinla's eyes widened in alarm. I'm exaggerating, Jack quickly added. Mostly. The point is, we all have our challenges, but we keep going, because the work we do matters. Your job up there in the fancy meeting rooms, my job down in the maintenance shafts, it's all part of keeping this crazy experiment running. To Jack's surprise, Zinla's skin began to glow with a warm golden light. Thank you, Jack Foster. Your words are unexpectedly wise and comforting. Jack felt his cheeks heat up. Well, just calling it like I see it. They had reached the entrance to the central garden. The massive hydroponics bay was a riot of color and life, filled with carefully curated plant species from 100 worlds. It was Harmony's crown jewel, a living symbol of cooperation and coexistence. Well, here we are, Jack said, gesturing to the ornate doors. Think you can find your way from here? Zinla's luminescence pulsed in what Jack was beginning to recognize as amusement. Yes, I believe I can manage. Thank you, Jack, for the escort and for the conversation. It was most illuminating. Jack grinned. Any time. And hey, if you ever need a break from all that high-level negotiating, you're welcome to come down to the maintenance levels. I can show you how to recalibrate a phase inverter. Very relaxing work. Zunla made that chiming laugh again. I may just take you up on that offer. Farewell, Jack Foster. May your repairs always hold. As the Celeste glided into the garden, Jack shook his head in bemusement. It had been a strange end to a long shift, but not an unpleasant one. He turned to head back to his quarters, his steps lighter than they had been in weeks. Little did Jack know that this chance encounter would set in motion a chain of events that would change not only his life, but the course of galactic history. The human maintenance worker and the alien diplomat, an unlikely pair whose friendship would be tested in ways neither could imagine. But that was a story for another day. For now, Jack had a date with his bunk, and dreams of a future where humanity's place among the stars was secure. As he drifted off to sleep, Jack's last thoughts were of iridescent eyes and the gentle sound of chimes. He smiled, wondering what other surprises Harmony might have in store for him. The station might be held together by duct tape and wishful thinking, but in that moment, it felt like the most wondrous place in the universe. Cultural exchange. In the weeks following their chance encounter, Jack found himself crossing paths with Zinla more frequently than he ever would have expected. What began as occasional meetings in the central garden soon evolved into regular catch-ups over meals in the station's diverse eateries. Today, they sat in a small Terran-style cafe, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the exotic scents of alien cuisines from nearby establishments. Jack watched in amusement as Zinla cautiously sipped from a steaming mug of hot chocolate. The Celeste's iridescent skin rippled with a kaleidoscope of colors, surprise, pleasure, and a hint of something Jack couldn't quite identify. This beverage, Zinla said, their melodious voice filled with wonder. It's unlike anything in Celeste cuisine. So rich, so comforting. Jack grinned, taking a swig of his own black coffee. Wait till you try it with marshmallows, though I'm not sure if they'd agree with your biology. Zinla set down the mug, their elongated fingers tracing patterns on its surface. It's remarkable how something so simple can bring such joy. In my culture, we have nothing like this. Our sustenance is purely functional, designed to provide optimal nutrition with minimal resource expenditure. Sounds efficient, Jack said, trying to keep the pity out of his voice. A life without chocolate. Unimaginable. It is, Zinla agreed, but there was a note of wistfulness in their tone. But I'm beginning to see the value in your human concept of comfort food. It's not just about sustenance, is it? It's about connection, pleasure, memory. Jack nodded, surprised by the alien's insight. Yeah, that's it exactly. My mom used to make hot chocolate for me when I was a kid. Whenever I drink it now, it's like I'm back home, you know. Zinla's eyes brightened with interest. Tell me more about your home, Jack. What was it like growing up on Earth? And so, over the next hour, Jack found himself recounting stories from his childhood in rural Montana. He told Zinla about summer thunderstorms, the scent of pine forests, and the breathtaking expanse of the night sky. He described the thrill of his first hoverbike ride and the bitter disappointment of his high school crush rejecting him for prom. Zinla listened with rapt attention, occasionally asking questions that made Jack see his own experiences in a new light. Why did humans place such importance on romantic partnerships at a young age? What purpose did the prom ritual serve in social development? As Jack struggled to explain concepts he'd never really examined before, he found himself growing curious about Zinla's world in return. So what about you? He asked, leaning back in his chair. What's it like growing up as a Celeste? Zinla's skin shimmered with a soft, contemplative blue. It is very different from your experience, I think. Celeste are born in clutches, raised communally in creches. We don't have the concept of individual parents as you do. Jack's eyebrows rose. No parents. I can't even imagine that. It has its advantages, Zaina said. Every adult in the community is responsible for every child. There's a great sense of unity, of shared purpose. But they hesitated, the luminescence dimming slightly. But, Jack prompted gently. But sometimes I wonder if we miss out on the kind of deep, personal connections you describe. The idea of having one or two individuals so invested in your personal growth and happiness, it's fascinating. Jack nodded slowly, trying to wrap his head around the concept. I guess every way of doing things has its pros and cons. So how did you end up becoming a diplomat? Was that something you chose, or were you, assigned to it? Zinla's skin rippled with amusement. A bit of both, actually. In Celeste society, we undergo extensive aptitude testing throughout our development. Those who show promise in areas like empathy, language acquisition, and conflict resolution are guided towards diplomatic roles. But the final choice is always our own. And you chose it, Jack said. It wasn't a question. I did, Zaina confirmed. I've always been fascinated by other cultures, other ways of thinking. The idea of bridging gaps between different species, finding common ground, it called to me in a way I can't fully explain. Jack grinned. Well, I'd say you made the right choice. You've certainly managed to bridge the gap with this grubby human mechanic. Zinla's skin flushed with a warm, golden glow. You sell yourself short, Jack Foster. Your perspective has been invaluable to me, both personally and professionally. Before Jack could respond, a chime sounded from Zinla's communication device. The Celeste's colors shifted rapidly: surprise, frustration, resignation. The Arcturian delegation, Zinla explained with a sigh. They've called an emergency session. I'm afraid I must go. As they stood to leave, Jack felt a pang of disappointment. These conversations with Zinla had become the highlight of his often monotonous days on the station. Hey, he said on impulse, when you're done with all the political stuff, why did you come down to the maintenance levels? I could show you around, give you a behind-the-scenes look at how we keep this place running. Zinla's eyes widened in surprise, then crinkled in what Jack had come to recognize as a smile. I would like that very much, Jack. Thank you. As the Celeste glided away, their form drawing curious glances from other patrons, Jack found himself marveling at the strange turns his life had taken. A month ago, the idea of befriending an alien diplomat would have seemed absurd. Now, he couldn't imagine his days without these cultural exchanges. Later that week, true to his word, Jack led Zinla through the labyrinthine corridors of Harmony's maintenance sectors. The Celeste diplomat seemed fascinated by the complex interplay of systems that kept the station functional: the hum of power conduits, the hiss of atmosphere regulators, the steady thrum of the artificial gravity generators. It's remarkable, Zaina said, their voice filled with awe. I had no idea so much work went on behind the scenes. We take so much for granted up in the diplomatic quarters. Jack shrugged, but he couldn't hide his pride. Someone's got to keep the lights on and the air flowing. It's not glamorous, but it's necessary. As they made their way through a particularly narrow passage, Zinla's elongated form had to contort in ways that would have been comical if not for the genuine interest in their eyes. Jack, the Celeste said suddenly, may I ask you something? Sure, shoot. Why did you choose this work? Surely with your intelligence and problem-solving skills, you could have pursued a more prestigious career path. Jack was silent for a moment, considering the question. I guess. I've always been good with my hands, figuring out how things work, fixing them when they break. And out here, he gestured to the station around them, what I do matters. Maybe I'm not negotiating trade deals or preventing wars, but I'm keeping people safe, comfortable, giving them a place where they can do all that important stuff without worrying if the air's going to run out or the gravity's going to fail. Zinla's skin glowed with a warm, appreciative light. That is, a very noble perspective, Jack. I think perhaps we in the diplomatic course could learn something from your approach. Before Jack could respond, a loud alarm blared through the corridor. Red emergency lights began to flash, casting an eerie glow over Zinla's shimmering skin. "That's not good," Jack muttered, already reaching for his diagnostic tool. "Something's wrong with the main power grid." As if in response to his words, the lights flickered ominously. Zinla's natural bioluminescence suddenly became the brightest source of illumination in the cramped passageway. "Jack." There was a note of fear in the Celesti's voice. "What's happening?" "I'm not sure," Jack said, his fingers flying over the diagnostic panel. "But whatever it is, it's big. We need to get to the central control room. Now." As they raced through the darkening corridors, Jack's mind whirled with possibilities. A cascade failure in the power grid could be catastrophic for a station this size. Thousands of lives, human and alien, hung in the balance. He glanced at Zinla, the alien's glowing form a beacon in the gloom. Their earlier conversation about the importance of his work suddenly took on a grim new significance. It was no longer about comfort or convenience. Now it was about survival. As they rounded the final corner to the control room, Jack steeled himself for what lay ahead. Whatever the problem was, he would fix it. He had to. The fate of Harmony, and perhaps the future of interstellar relations, depended on it. Little did he know that this crisis would test not only his technical skills, but also the newfound bond between human and Celesti. The true challenge was just beginning. Crisis on the station. The control room was a cacophony of blaring alarms and frantic activity when Jack and Zinla burst through the doors. Technicians of various species hurried from console to console, their voices raised in a mix of Earth standard and alien languages. The main view screen flickered ominously, displaying a schematic of Harmony's power grid awash in angry red warning indicators. "Foster." A gruff voice cut through the chaos. Chief Engineer Valentina Petrova, a stocky woman with steel-grey hair and eyes to match, strode towards them. "Where the hell have you been? And what's a Celesti doing down here?" Jack straightened, automatically falling into a posture of respect for his superior. "Sorry, Chief. I was giving Ambassador Zinla a tour when the alarms went off. What's the situation?" Petrova's eyes narrowed at the mention of the ambassador, but the urgency of the crisis overrode any questions she might have had about the odd pairing. "It's the main reactor. We're looking at a potential meltdown if we can't stabilize it in the next hour." Jack felt his blood run cold. A reactor meltdown wouldn't just mean the end of Harmony. It could potentially irradiate half the sector, setting back interstellar relations by decades. "What caused it?" he asked, already moving towards the nearest free console. Petrova shook her head, frustration evident in every line of her face. "We're not sure. The safety protocols are malfunctioning, and we can't get a clear reading on the core temperature. It's like something's interfering with our sensors." As Jack's fingers flew over the controls, calling up diagnostic routines and system logs, he felt a cool presence at his side. Zinla leaned in, their luminescent skin casting a soft glow over the console. "Perhaps I can be of assistance," the Celesti offered. Celesti's sensory organs are capable of detecting radiation fluctuations that might be imperceptible to your instruments. Petrova looked skeptical, but Jack saw a glimmer of hope. "Chief," he said, "it's worth a shot. We need all the help we can get right now." After a moment's hesitation, Petrova nodded curtly. "Fine, but if that alien messes anything up, it's on you, Foster." As Zinla began to interface with the station's systems, their skin pulsing with rapid color changes, Jack turned his attention back to the problem at hand. He pulled up the reactor schematics, looking for any anomalies that might explain the sudden instability. Minutes ticked by, each one bringing them closer to catastrophe. Sweat beaded on Jack's forehead as he worked, acutely aware of the lives hanging in the balance. Not just the station's inhabitants, but potentially billions across the sector if the worst should happen. Suddenly, Zinla's voice cut through his concentration. "Jack, I'm detecting an unusual energy signature near the reactor core. It doesn't match any known radiation pattern in my database." Jack's head snapped up. Can you pinpoint it? Zinla's eyes closed in concentration, their skin rippling with intense patterns of light. Yes, it seems to be emanating from a point about 3 meters above the main coolant intake. That's impossible, Petrova interjected. There's nothing there but empty space. But Jack's mind was already racing. Unless, Chief, what if it's not empty? What if there's something there we can't see? Petrova's eyes widened as she caught onto his train of thought. Some kind of cloak device? But who wooled? Sabotage, Jack finished grimly. Someone's trying to bring down the station. The control room fell silent as the implications sank in. Harmony wasn't just experiencing a malfunction, it was under attack. We need to get down there, Jack said, already moving towards the exit. If we can locate and disable whatever's causing this, we might be able to stabilize the reactor. Are you insane, Foster? Petrova demanded. The radiation levels near the core are off the charts. You'd be dead before you got within 10 meters of it. Jack hesitated, the weight of responsibility settling heavily on his shoulders. She was right. A human wouldn't stand a chance in that environment. But then he felt a gentle touch on his arm. I can go, Zinla said softly. Celesti physiology is more resistant to radiation than most species, and with my sensory capabilities, I have the best chance of locating the device quickly. Jack turned to face his friend, conflict warring in his chest. Zinla, no, it's too dangerous. You're a diplomat, not a technician. This isn't your responsibility. The Celesti's skin glowed with a warm, determined light. Is this not what Harmony stands for, Jack? Different species coming together, using our unique abilities to solve problems neither could face alone. You've shown me the importance of your work here. Now let me show you the importance of mine. For a moment, Jack was speechless. He looked into Zinla's iridescent eyes and saw not just determination, but trust. Trust in him, in their friendship, in the ideals that Harmony represented. Finally, he nodded. Okay, but you're not going in there alone. I'm coming with you, at least as far as the radiation shielding will allow. I can talk you through disabling the device once you find it. Petrova looked between the human and the Celesti, a mix of disbelief and grudging respect on her face. You're both crazy, she muttered, but we're out of options. Go, and Foster, good luck. As Jack and Zinla raced towards the reactor core, the station around them groaned and shuddered. Emergency bulkheads were slamming shut, sealing off sections in preparation for a potential breach. The corridors were eerily empty, most of the crew having evacuated to the emergency shelters. They reached the final security checkpoint before the reactor chamber. Jack quickly keyed in his override codes, his heart pounding in his chest. Zinla, he said as the massive doors began to slide open, are you sure about this? There's no shame in turning back. The Celesti's skin pulsed with a kaleidoscope of colors, fear, determination, and something else Jack couldn't quite identify. I am sure, Jack. You have taught me much about human courage these past weeks. Allow me to demonstrate some Celesti courage in return. As Zinla stepped through the doorway, their form already beginning to glow with protective bioluminescence, Jack felt a surge of pride and worry in equal measure. He watched his friend disappear into the pulsing, radiation-filled chamber beyond, the doors sealing shut behind them. Now, all he could do was wait and hope that their unlikely friendship, this union of human ingenuity and alien perception, would be enough to save Harmony, and with it, the dream of a united galaxy. In the reactor chamber, bathed in the ominous glow of the destabilizing core, Zinla moved with purposeful grace. Their every sense was attuned to the invisible threat, seeking the anomaly that threatened not just the station, but the fragile peace between worlds. As the minutes ticked by, Jack's voice a steady presence in their ear, guiding and encouraging, Zinla reflected on the strange turns of fate that had led to this moment. A chance encounter in a maintenance corridor, cultural exchanges over hot chocolate, and now they stood as perhaps the last hope for thousands of lives. With renewed determination, Zinla pressed on. Whatever the outcome, they knew that this crisis would forge a bond between human and Celesti that could never be broken. And perhaps, just perhaps, it would be the catalyst for a new era of interstellar cooperation. The fate of Harmony and the galaxy hung in the balance, and at the heart of it all, an unlikely pair of friends united in their quest to keep the dream of unity alive. Diplomatic tensions. The emergency klaxons fell silent, replaced by an eerie quiet that seemed to stretch across the entirety of Harmony's station. In the reactor control room, Jack Foster stood rigid, his eyes fixed on the main view screen. The angry red warnings had faded, replaced by a sea of cautionary yellows and gradually reassuring greens. "We did it," he breathed, hardly daring to believe it. "Zinla, do you copy? The reactor is stabilizing." For a heart-stopping moment, there was no response. Then, crackling with static, Zinla's melodious voice came through the comm system. "I copy, Jack. The device has been neutralized. Requesting emergency decontamination protocols." Jack's elation quickly turned to concern. "Hang on, we're coming to get you out of there." As the rescue team rushed to extract Zinla from the reactor chamber, Jack found himself pacing nervously. The danger might have passed, but he knew this crisis was far from over. Someone had tried to sabotage Harmony, and the political fallout would be severe. Hours later, after Zinla had been cleared by the medical team, with only minor radiation exposure, thanks to their unique physiology, Jack found himself in an unfamiliar position. He stood beside his Celesti friend in Harmony's main conference room, facing the assembled representatives of the station's resident species. The human ambassador, a stern-faced woman named Ilara Vance, was the first to speak. "This is unprecedented," she began, her voice tight with barely contained anger. "An act of terrorism on a neutral station. We demand an immediate investigation." The Arcturian delegate, a crystalline being that seemed to shimmer with internal light, chimed in. "And who would conduct this investigation? We cannot trust the humans with this task, given their history of aggression." Jack felt Zinla tense beside him. The Celesti stepped forward, their skin pulsing with calming blues and greens. "Esteemed colleagues, please. We must not let fear and suspicion drive us apart. That is precisely what the perpetrators of this attack would want." Ambassador Vance's eyes narrowed. "With all due respect, Ambassador Zinla, your objectivity in this matter is questionable. Your association with this human maintenance worker is well known." Jack bristled at the dismissive tone but held his tongue. This was Zinla's arena, not his. The Celesti's luminescence flickered briefly with what Jack recognized as irritation, but their voice remained steady. "It is precisely because of my association with Jack Foster that I can speak to the integrity of the human crew on this station. Without their quick thinking and willingness to trust in interspecies cooperation, we would not be having this discussion. We would all be dead." A murmur ran through the assembled delegates. Jack noticed a few thoughtful nods, but many faces, of various anatomies, remained skeptical. The Novan representative, a being composed of swirling gases contained within a transparent exoskeleton, spoke next. "The Celesti's words have merit, but the fact remains that someone managed to plant a sabotage device in the most secure area of the station. This indicates a serious breach in our collective security." "Agreed," rumbled the Kettal ambassador, his massive, furred form dwarfing the beings around him. "We must consider the possibility that this was an inside job. Perhaps even a false flag operation by one of the major powers to justify increased military presence in the sector." The room erupted into a cacophony of accusations and denials. Jack watched in dismay as years of carefully cultivated diplomacy threatened to unravel in minutes. He glanced at Zinla, seeing his own concern mirrored in the Celesti's iridescent eyes. "Enough." The booming voice cut through the chaos like a thunderclap. All eyes turned to the far end of the table, where Station Director Imani Okoro had risen to her feet. The statuesque woman's face was a mask of controlled fury. "We are better than this," she said, her voice low, but carrying to every corner of the room. Harmony was built as a symbol of cooperation, a neutral ground where we could work out our differences peacefully, and at the first sign of trouble, we turn on each other like animals. A chastened silence fell over the assembly. Director Okoro continued, her gaze sweeping the room. "Ambassador Zinla is correct. We cannot let fear drive us apart. But the Novun delegate is also right. Our security has been compromised. Therefore, I propose a joint investigation team with representatives from all major species present on Harmony." She paused, letting the idea sink in. "Furthermore, I want Jack Foster and Ambassador Zinla to lead this investigation." A chorus of protests immediately arose. Ambassador Vance's voice rose above the din. "Director, you can't be serious. Foster is a maintenance worker, not a security expert, and Zinla, while respected, is a junior diplomat. This is too important to entrust to amateurs." Director Okoro's expression hardened. "It is precisely because they are outsiders that I want them in charge. They have no political agenda, no axe to grind. More importantly, they have demonstrated the kind of interspecies cooperation that Harmony was founded on. Their actions saved this station and everyone on it." She turned to Jack and Zinla. "That is, if you're willing to take on this responsibility." Jack felt a moment of panic. He was a mechanic, not a detective or a diplomat. He looked at Zinla, seeing his own uncertainty reflected in the Celeste's shifting colors. But beneath that, he saw determination and trust. Zinla's hand found his, cool and smooth against his calloused palm. The Celeste nodded almost imperceptibly. Taking a deep breath, Jack turned back to Director Okoro. "We'll do it," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "For Harmony, for the future we're all trying to build here." As the meeting adjourned, tensions still simmering beneath the surface of forced civility, Jack and Zinla found themselves alone in the conference room. The weight of their new responsibility settled heavily on both their shoulders. "Well," Jack said with a nervous laugh, "I guess we're in charge of saving interstellar peace now. No pressure or anything." Zinla's skin rippled with a mix of anxiety and amusement. "Indeed, it seems our little cultural exchange has taken quite the dramatic turn." As they stood there, a human maintenance worker and a Celeste diplomat, both far out of their depth but united in purpose, Jack couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. If their unlikely friendship could bridge the gap between their species, maybe, just maybe, they could help bridge the growing divide threatening to tear Harmony apart. "We can do this," he said, as much to convince himself as Zinla, together. The Celeste's hand tightened around his, their skin glowing with warm, determined light. Together, Zinla agreed. As they left the conference room, stepping into an uncertain future, neither could shake the feeling that the real challenge was only just beginning. The sabotage attempt had been thwarted, but the seeds of mistrust had been sown. It would take all their combined skills, human ingenuity and Celeste insight, to uncover the truth and preserve the fragile peace of Harmony Station. The fate of interstellar relations hung in the balance, and an unlikely pair of friends found themselves at the center of a cosmic storm. But as they walked side by side, human and Celeste, they carried with them the hope of a united galaxy, a hope that burned brighter than any star in the vast expanse of space, proving humanity's worth. The days following the reactor incident blurred together in a whirlwind of activity. Jack found himself thrust into a world of high-stakes diplomacy and covert investigation, a far cry from the familiar routine of maintenance shafts and circuit boards. Zinla proved an invaluable partner, their diplomatic training complementing Jack's practical problem-solving skills. As they delved deeper into the mystery of the sabotage attempt, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. The device they had disabled in the reactor core bore hallmarks of human technology, yet it incorporated alien elements that no human engineer should have had access to. "It doesn't make sense," Jack muttered, poring over the analysis reports in their makeshift investigation headquarters, a converted storage room in the maintenance sector. Why would anyone want to make it look like humans were behind this? Xinla's skin rippled with thoughtful hues. Perhaps that is precisely the point, Jack. To cast suspicion on humanity, to undermine your species' standing in the galactic community. Jack frowned, a sinking feeling in his gut. You think someone's trying to sabotage more than just the station? They're targeting Earth's reputation. It's a possibility we must consider, Xinla said gently. Your species' rapid advancement and expansion have made some of the older races uncomfortable. There are those who would prefer to see humanity contained, relegated to a minor role in galactic affairs. The implications hit Jack like a punch to the gut. He'd always known that humanity's position in the interstellar community was precarious, but the idea that someone would go to such lengths to discredit his entire species was staggering. We need to prove it wasn't us, he said, determination hardening his voice. And we need to find out who's really behind this before they can try again. Their investigation led them through a labyrinth of dead ends and false leads. They interviewed countless crew members and delegates, pored over security logs, and even conducted covert surveillance operations in some of Harmony's less reputable establishments. Through it all, Jack found himself increasingly impressed by Xinla's skills. The Celesti's ability to read subtle cues in alien body language and detect half-truths proved invaluable. In turn, Xinla seemed to gain a new appreciation for Jack's intuitive grasp of technology and his knack for thinking outside the box. But as they made progress, they also faced growing opposition. Not everyone on Harmony was happy with the idea of a human and a Celesti leading such a sensitive investigation. Whispers of conspiracy and cover-up began to circulate. More than once, Jack caught hostile glares from both humans and aliens as he moved through the station's corridors. The pressure came to a head during a tense meeting with the Joint Security Council. Ambassador Vance, her face pinched with barely concealed contempt, addressed Jack directly. "Mr. Foster," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "while we appreciate your enthusiasm, some of us are concerned that your lack of experience in these matters may be hampering the investigation. Perhaps it would be best if you stepped aside and let the professionals handle this." Jack felt a surge of anger, but before he could respond, Xinla stepped forward. The Celesti's skin pulsed with intense colors that Jack had learned to associate with righteous indignation. "With respect, Ambassador," Xinla said, their melodious voice carrying a sharp edge, "Jack Foster has demonstrated more professionalism and dedication to uncovering the truth than many so-called professionals I have encountered in my diplomatic career. His unique perspective has been invaluable to this investigation." The Arcturian delegate chimed in, its crystalline form vibrating with skepticism. "Pretty words, Ambassador Xinla, but do you have any actual progress to report? Or are we to continue trusting the fate of interstellar peace to a maintenance worker and a junior diplomat?" Jack felt his cheeks burn, but he forced himself to remain calm. This was his chance to prove that humanity, that he deserved a place at the galactic table. "Actually," he said, stepping up beside Xinla, "we do have something to report." Over the next hour, Jack and Xinla laid out their findings. They presented evidence of a sophisticated conspiracy involving elements from multiple species. The sabotage attempt, they explained, was merely the first step in a larger plan to destabilize Harmony and fracture the fragile alliances between worlds. As they spoke, Jack could see the skepticism in the council members' eyes gradually give way to grudging respect. Even Ambassador Vance seemed impressed, though she tried to hide it. When they finished, Director Okoro leaned forward, her eyes intense. "This is disturbing news. If what you're saying is true, we're facing a threat unlike anything we've encountered before, a threat to the very idea of interspecies cooperation." Jack nodded sullenly. "Yes, Director, but we've also uncovered leads on who might be behind this. With the Council's support, we believe we can expose the conspirators and put an end to their plans." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Finally, the Kettal ambassador spoke, his rumbling voice thoughtful. "You have done well, human, Perhaps we were too quick to judge your species' potential." Zinla's hand found Jack's, a gesture of solidarity that did not go unnoticed by the assembled delegates. "This is what harmony represents," the Celesti said, their skin glowing with pride. Different species working together, each contributing their unique strengths to solve problems that none of us could face alone. As the meeting adjourned, with the council voting to give Jack and Zinla expanded resources and authority to continue their investigation, Jack felt a swelling of emotion in his chest. It wasn't just pride in a job well done, it was hope. Hope that humanity had taken a significant step towards proving its worth to the galactic community. Outside the council chambers, Zinla turned to Jack, their iridescent eyes shimmering with an emotion Jack couldn't quite name. "You did well in there, Jack Foster. You've shown them the best of what humanity has to offer." Jack felt his cheeks flush. "We did well," he corrected. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, Zinla." As they stood there, a human and a Celesti united in purpose, Jack realized that they had become more than just investigators or even friends. They were a symbol, a living embodiment of the cooperation and understanding that Harmony Station represented. But even as he basked in the glow of their success, a nagging worry gnawed at the back of Jack's mind. They had made progress, yes, but the true masterminds behind the conspiracy were still at large, and something told him that those shadowy figures wouldn't take kindly to having their plans exposed. As they set off to follow their new leads, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that the real test, for himself, for Zinla, for humanity, and for the dream of a united galaxy, was still to come. The stakes were higher than ever, and failure was not an option. With Zinla at his side, Jack steeled himself for the challenges ahead. Whatever came next, they would face it together. A maintenance worker and a diplomat, human and Celesti, united in their quest to save Harmony and secure humanity's place among the stars. Unforeseen consequences. The next few weeks were a blur of frantic activity for Jack and Zinla. Their investigation took them to the furthest reaches of Harmony Station, from the opulent diplomatic quarters to the grimy underbelly of the lower decks. With each new piece of evidence they uncovered, the conspiracy grew more complex and far-reaching than they had ever imagined. Late one night, as they pored over encrypted data files in their makeshift headquarters, Jack leaned back in his chair, rubbing his tired eyes. "I can't believe how deep this goes," he muttered. "We've got evidence implicating high-ranking officials from at least 5 different species." Zinla's skin pulsed with worried hues. Indeed, it seems the goal was not merely to discredit humanity, but to sow discord among all the major powers, to make cooperation impossible. Jack nodded grimly. Divide and conquer. Classic strategy. But who benefits from all this chaos? Before Zinla could respond, an alert chimed on their secure communication channel. It was Director Okoro, her usually composed face etched with concern. "Foster, Zinla, we have a situation. You need to get to Docking Bay 7 immediately. Our suspects are trying to leave the station." Jack and Zinla exchanged a quick glance before springing into action. As they raced through Harmony's corridors, Jack's mind whirled with possibilities. Had they tipped their hand somehow? Or was this part of the conspirators' plan all along? They arrived at the docking bay to find it in chaos. Security personnel from various species were engaged in a tense standoff with a group of armed individuals attempting to board a sleek, unmarked vessel. To Jack's shock, he recognized one of the figures. It was Grell, a Ketol maintenance worker he had considered a friend. The massive, furred alien's eyes met Jack's, filled with a mixture of defiance and regret. "Grell," Jack called out, his voice thick with disbelief. "What are you doing? Why?" The Ketol's ears flattened against his skull. "I'm sorry, Jack. You don't understand. None of you do. The galaxy is changing, and some of us need to make sure it changes in the right way." Zinla stepped forward, their skin rippling with calming colors. "Please, explain it to us then. Whatever your grievances, surely we can address them through dialogue, not violence." For a moment, it seemed like Grell might waver. But then one of his companions, a tall, shadow-shrouded figure Jack didn't recognize, hissed something in a language he couldn't understand. Grell's expression hardened. "It's too late for talk," he growled. "The old powers have grown complacent. It's time for a new order." What happened next was a blur of motion and sound. The armed group made a break for their ship, security forces moved to intercept, and energy weapons flared to life. Jack found himself pulling Zinla behind a stack of cargo containers as blaster fire filled the air. "We can't let them leave," Jack shouted over the din. "Everything we've worked for, all the progress we've made, it'll all be for nothing if they escape." Zinla's eyes met his, filled with determination. "I have an idea, but it's risky. Do you trust me, Jack?" Without hesitation, Jack nodded. "With my life." What followed was a daring plan that combined Zinla's diplomatic finesse with Jack's technical expertise. Using the Celesti's unique abilities to project calming pheromones and Jack's knowledge of the station's systems, they managed to create a diversion that allowed them to approach the conspirators' ship undetected. In a heart-stopping moment, Jack found himself face to face with the shadowy leader of the group. The being's features were obscured by an advanced cloaking device, but its voice was cold and filled with contempt. "You think you've won, human," it sneered. "This is bigger than you can imagine. We are the future, the next step in galactic evolution. You and your primitive species are merely obstacles to be overcome." Jack felt a surge of anger, but he forced himself to remain calm. "Maybe we are primitive," he said, his voice steady, "but we're also stubborn as hell, and we don't give up on our friends or our principles." With that, he activated the device Zinla had given him. A pulse of energy rippled through the docking bay, temporarily disabling the conspirators' weapons and disrupting their cloaking technology. In the chaos that followed, security forces were able to apprehend the would-be escapees. As Grell was led away in restraints, he looked at Jack with a mixture of anger and grudging respect. "You don't know what you've done, Jack," he rumbled. "The galaxy isn't ready for the truth." Jack watched his former friend go, a hollow feeling in his chest. "Maybe not," he murmured, "but we have to try." In the days that followed, the full scope of the conspiracy was revealed. The group had been composed of extremists from various species, united in their belief that conflict and competition, not cooperation, was the key to galactic progress. They had sought to manipulate events on a massive scale, playing different factions against each other to create a new harsh order. As Jack and Zinla stood before the assembled delegates of Harmony Station, presenting their final report, the mood was somber but resolute. Director Okoro addressed the assembly, her voice firm. "What we have uncovered here is a threat not just to harmony, but to the very idea of interspecies cooperation. But thanks to the efforts of Jack Foster and Ambassador Zinla, we have been given a chance to reaffirm our commitment to unity and understanding." The Arcturian delegate chimed in, its crystalline form glowing with approval. "Indeed, the human Foster has proven that his species, despite its youth, has much to offer our galactic community. And the Celesti Zinla has demonstrated the value of seeing beyond our differences." As the meeting concluded, with resolutions passed to strengthen Harmony's security and foster even greater cooperation between species, Jack felt a profound sense of accomplishment and responsibility. Later, as he and Zinla stood in the central garden, watching ships come and go through the massive viewports, Jack turned to his friend. "So, what happens now?" he asked. Zinla's skin shimmered with thoughtful colors. "Now, my dear Jack, we continue the work we've started. This crisis has shown us the fragility of peace, but also the strength we find in unity. There will always be those who seek to divide us, but as long as there are people willing to reach across the boundaries of species and culture, there is hope." Jack nodded, a smile tugging at his lips. "You know, when I took this job, I never imagined I'd end up helping save galactic civilization. I was just a guy good with a wrench." "And now?" Zinla prompted, their iridescent eyes twinkling. "Now," Jack said, his voice filled with determination, I think I found my true calling, helping build bridges between people, between worlds. It's not so different from maintaining the station when you think about it, just on a much bigger scale. As they stood there, a human maintenance worker turned galactic peacekeeper and a Celesti diplomat who had found unexpected friendship in an unlikely place, Jack realized that they represented something greater than themselves. They were living proof that the dream of harmony, of a united, cooperative galaxy, was not just possible, but worth fighting for. The challenges ahead were many, and the scars left by the conspiracy would take time to heal. But as Jack looked out at the stars, Zinlar's cool hand in his, he felt a sense of hope and purpose that he had never known before. Together, they had faced a crisis that threatened to tear the galaxy apart, and together, they would continue to work towards a future where the boundaries between species faded, and the spirit of cooperation that had saved harmony would spread to every corner of the cosmos. As new ships docked and familiar ones departed, carrying with them the story of what had transpired on Harmony Station, Jack knew that this was not an end, but a beginning. A new chapter in the grand story of galactic civilization, one in which humanity, thanks in part to a simple maintenance worker who dared to reach out to the stars, would play a vital and respected role. The future, vast and filled with possibilities, awaited, and Jack Foster, hand in hand with his Celesti friend, was ready to face it head-on.